The restaurant felt like our little bubble away from the world. Dim lights, soft jazz floating in the air, and the warm scent of garlic butter wrapping around me like comfort. I sat across from Daniel, fingers idly circling the rim of my wine glass, savoring the rare, quiet evening we had carved out for ourselves. With each laugh we shared, I felt a piece of us flicker back to life. I leaned in, soaking up the sound of his voice, almost convincing myself this dinner was a promise, that maybe, just maybe, we were finding our way back. But then I saw it, the sudden shift in Daniel's face. His eyes widened, his shoulders tensed, and in an instant the mood cracked. I followed his gaze to the entrance and my stomach tightened. She walked in like she owned the place. Melissa. Her heels struck the wooden floor like punctuation, her confidence filling the room before she even reached our table. My chest tightened, my breath caught, but I forced a polite smile onto my lips. After all, I wasn't going to let her see me flinch. Daniel half rose from his seat, that awkward mix of surprise and forced charm spilling over his face. Melissa? Wow. It's been years, he blurted out, his tone just a little too eager. And there she was, smirking, eyes flicking over to me as if sizing me up before I could even say a word. She tilted her head, that smirk never leaving her lips. Daniel. And this must be your wife. The way she said it sliced through the air, like my existence was a curious afterthought. I straightened my back, forcing warmth into my smile. Yes, I'm Victoria, I replied, my voice steady even as my stomach tightened into knots. Inside, though, I could feel the temperature of the evening dropping. Melissa's eyes swept over me, slow and deliberate, before she leaned back slightly, as if she'd already reached her verdict. Interesting, she murmured, her tone dripping with condescension. I never pictured you with someone like her. The words hit me harder than I wanted to admit, but I kept my chin high. My pulse drummed in my ears, begging me to react, yet I swallowed it down. This wasn't about her, I told myself. It couldn't be. Daniel laughed awkwardly, clearly hoping to smooth things over. Melissa, come on, he said, shifting in his seat, but his voice didn't carry the firmness I needed to hear. I studied his face, searching for even the smallest defense of me, the wife sitting right beside him. But instead, there was hesitation, a flicker of discomfort that left me colder than Melissa's sharp little jab, and that silence spoke louder than anything else. I forced another smile, one I'd practiced too many times before, the kind that hides more than it reveals. Inside, though, my stomach churned. Melissa's presence felt like a shadow stretching across the table, swallowing the warmth Daniel and I had just been clinging to. I wanted to enjoy my glass of wine, savor the night we'd planned, but her voice lingered, sharp and deliberate, every word designed to unsettle me. I caught Daniel watching her, his expression a strange mix of nostalgia and unease. That glance made something inside me shift, a quiet alarm, faint but impossible to ignore. Was this how it would be, I wondered, me sitting politely while another woman threw darts at my dignity? My chest felt heavy, but I straightened my shoulders. If Melissa wanted a reaction, she wasn't getting it. Not yet. Still, the evening had already been altered, cracked like glass under pressure. Every sound in the restaurant seemed louder, the clinking of silverware, the hum of conversations, the laugh from a nearby table. They all pressed against me, reminding me I couldn't slip away unnoticed. I sat there, trapped between Daniel's silence and Melissa's smugness, realizing this dinner wasn't just dinner anymore. Something had shifted, and I could feel the night steering toward a place I wasn't ready for. The longer Melissa lingered at our table, the heavier the air became. I tried to sip my wine, pretending she wasn't there, but she wasn't about to let me off so easily. Her smile widened as she leaned in, her voice silky with venom. Daniel always had such refined taste before, she said, her eyes flicking to me like I was some kind of downgrade. But I suppose things change. The words were coated in sugar, but they stung like acid. Heat crawled up my neck, and before I could stop myself, my reply slipped out sharper than I'd planned. And I suppose some people don't change at all, still rude as ever. My voice was steady, but inside my chest, my heart was pounding hard enough I thought they might hear it across the room. Melissa only arched a brow, that smug look settling deeper into her face, as if she'd gotten exactly what she wanted. Daniel gave a nervous laugh, raising his hands as though he could wave the tension away. "Come on, let's not do this here," he said quickly, his tone light, but his eyes begged for control of a situation already slipping through his fingers. I looked at him, expecting him to defend me, to shut Melissa down. But he didn't, and that silence burned almost worse than her words. Melissa leaned back in her chair, swirling the stem of her glass between her fingers, as if she had all the time in the world to toy with me. "Daniel always did appreciate class," she purred, letting the pause hang in the air. "I suppose everyone has to settle at some point." Her words landed like tiny daggers, each one meant to draw blood without ever raising her voice. She wanted me rattled, and I could feel my body reacting, shoulders tense, jaw tight, pulse thrumming with anger. I forced myself to breathe, to hold on to some thread of dignity, but inside, a storm was building. It wasn't just her comments. It was the way Daniel sat there, fidgeting but silent, as though the easiest path was to let her keep poking me. I caught his eye for a moment, hoping, pleading for him to step in, to say something that proved I wasn't alone at that table. But all I saw was discomfort, not outrage, not protection, just a man who didn't want a scene. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just Melissa trying to humiliate me. This was Daniel letting it happen. The realization burned hotter than any insult she could throw. My lips pressed into a thin line, my hands gripping my napkin tight beneath the table. I wasn't sure how much longer I could sit there, biting back everything I wanted to scream. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, that slow burn that started in my ribs and crept up into my throat. Melissa's smirk told me she knew exactly what she was doing, and Daniel's silence told me I was on my own. I tried to steady my breathing, tried to remind myself this was supposed to be our night, but it was slipping away fast. The cozy restaurant that had once felt romantic now felt like a stage, and I was being cornered under a spotlight. Melissa leaned closer, her voice low but cutting enough for me to hear every word. It must take a lot of patience to live with him. I always wondered who'd sign up for that. Her laugh was soft, dismissive, and it sliced straight through me. My hand tightened around my fork, the metal cool and grounding, the only thing keeping me from shaking. I wanted to lash back, to wipe that smug look off her face, but something in me told me the timing wasn't right. Not yet. Daniel shifted uncomfortably, clearing his throat like he might say something, but instead he just muttered, "Melissa," in a weak attempt at control. I glanced at him, disbelief flooding my chest. How could he sit there, watching me be cut down piece by piece, and still not stand up for me? That silence wasn't just painful, it was humiliating. And in that moment, I knew something inside me had started to break. I couldn't take it anymore. Every word Melissa threw felt like salt rubbed into a wound, and Daniel's silence only made it worse. My chest felt tight, my throat raw from holding back, until finally the words burst out before I could stop them. "Enough with your comments, Melissa," I snapped, my voice louder than I intended. "You don't get to insult me while sitting in front of my husband." My hands trembled slightly under the table, but my gaze stayed locked on hers. Melissa's laugh was light, mocking, like she'd just won a game I didn't know I was playing. "Oh, darling," she said, drawing out the word with a venomous sweetness. "If you're this insecure, maybe you shouldn't be here." The dismissiveness in her tone made my skin prickle, a heat crawling up my arms and settling in my face. She wanted to humiliate me, to make me small, but I wasn't going to let her. Not this time. A few heads turned from nearby tables, whispers rustling around us like the sound of leaves in the wind. I could feel every pair of eyes on me, judging, measuring, waiting to see what I would do next. My heart thudded in my chest, but my voice was clear, steady, and louder than the hum of the restaurant. I wasn't just standing up to Melissa, I was standing up for myself, even if Daniel couldn't. Daniel's hand brushed against my arm under the table, a weak attempt to calm me down, but it only fueled the fire. I yanked my hand back, glaring at him for the first time that night. "Are you seriously just going to sit there?" I hissed, my words sharp enough to cut. He looked away, his lips pressed tight, unwilling to face me or Melissa. That silence was louder than any defense he could have given. Melissa tilted her head, her eyes glittering with amusement, like this was all a show she'd staged for her own entertainment. "Touchy, aren't we?" she murmured, sipping her wine with exaggerated grace. I was only making conversation. Her tone was innocent, but her smile betrayed her satisfaction. She wanted the crowd, she wanted the whispers, and now she had them. I could feel the weight of every stare pressing down on me, but instead of shrinking, I felt myself stand taller. I leaned forward, my voice clear and deliberate. "You don't get to waltz into my night and tear me down like I don't matter. Not anymore." My hands trembled, but it wasn't fear. It was fury, the kind that had been building for months, maybe years beneath the surface. For the first time, I didn't care about keeping the peace or pretending everything was fine. I cared about claiming my place, even if I had to do it under the watchful eyes of strangers. Melissa's laugh rang out louder this time, sharp and cruel, bouncing off the walls of the restaurant. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, her tone dripping with false pity. "You're really making a scene. How embarrassing. For him." She nodded toward Daniel, twisting the knife with a wicked smile. My cheeks burned, not with shame, but with rage. Every part of me screamed to walk out, but something stronger kept me rooted. I wasn't giving her the satisfaction of watching me crumble. The room felt smaller, the air thicker. I could hear the clinking of cutlery pause, the rustle of conversation dim. Eyes were on us, strangers leaning in to witness a drama they hadn't paid for. My pulse thundered in my ears, my breath shallow but steady. I met Melissa's gaze head-on, my voice sharp and unflinching. "If standing up for myself is embarrassing, then I'll gladly embarrass us all." Daniel shot up from his chair, his face flushed with frustration. He grabbed my arm, his voice low but urgent. "Victoria, enough. We're leaving." His fingers pressed against my skin as if to anchor me, to drag me out before the tension snapped completely. The stares, the whispers, Melissa's smug little smile, it all blurred together as he pulled me toward the door. And just like that, the night took a turn I knew I couldn't undo. The cool night air hit my face like a slap, sharp and sobering after the heat of the restaurant. Daniel's grip on my arm tightened as he pulled me a few steps away from the door, his voice hissing low but laced with anger. "Why do you always do this? Why do you always have to pick fights?" His words cut deeper than Melissa's ever could. I froze, staring at him, the man I thought would have my back, realizing in that moment he'd chosen her side over mine. My chest clenched, my voice trembling as it spilled out. "Me? You think I picked that fight? She was insulting me, Daniel. Over and over, right in front of you." I could hear the break in my voice, feel the sting in my eyes, but I didn't look away. I needed him to see me, to understand the weight of what he'd just said. But his face was set, hard, as if my pain was an inconvenience he didn't want to deal with. He shook his head, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "You need to stop being so dramatic. You always overreact." The words landed like stones in my chest. dramatic, overreacting, as if standing up for myself was a flaw, as if my dignity was something to be brushed aside. In that instant, the night wasn't about Melissa anymore. It was about us, about the cracks I'd been trying so hard not to see. His words echoed in my head, heavy and bruising, dramatic, overreacting. I swallowed hard, but the lump in my throat wouldn't budge. My voice cracked, yet it came out stronger than I expected. No, Daniel, I don't overreact. I'm tired. I'm tired of being disrespected. By her, and now by you. I could feel the sting of tears pressing behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not here, not in front of him. He looked at me like I was speaking another language, his brow furrowed, his lips parting as if he had something to say, but didn't know how to say it. That silence, that hesitation, told me more than any words could. He didn't see me, not the way I needed him to. And in that second, I realized this wasn't about winning an argument. It was about whether or not I still had a place in his world. The street was quiet, except for the hum of a passing car, headlights washing over us in a brief, harsh glare. I pulled my arm from his grip, my hand trembling as it fell to my side. The chill of the night seeped into me, but I welcomed it. It steadied me, cooled the fire burning inside. Looking at him, I felt something inside me shift, as if a door had opened and there was no way of closing it again. I took a step back, creating space between us, and for the first time that night, I felt steady on my own feet. My voice was low, but firm enough to carry. You think I'm the problem, Daniel? Maybe that's easier than admitting you never stood up for me. Not once tonight. His mouth opened as if to protest, but nothing came. Just silence. Silence that confirmed everything I'd been afraid of. The wind picked up, tugging at my hair, carrying the faint smell of food from the restaurant behind us. People passed by, glancing curiously, but I didn't care. All I could hear was my own heartbeat, steady now, stronger than it had been inside that suffocating room. I turned away from him, every step heavy but certain, each one peeling me further away from the man who'd just let me shatter in public. Victoria, wait, he called after me, but I didn't. Not this time. I kept walking, my heels clicking against the pavement, the night stretching wide open before me. I didn't know exactly where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay there. Not with him, not in the shadow of that betrayal. And as the distance grew, I felt something else stirring inside me, something that whispered of change, of choices I hadn't dared to make before. When I walked back into the house later that night, the silence felt heavier than his words had outside the restaurant. No clinking glasses, no music, no small talk to fill the gaps. Just stillness pressing against me. I went straight to the bedroom, my chest aching, but my hands already moving with purpose. I pulled a suitcase from the closet, the zipper's rasp echoing through the room like a decision being sealed. As I folded clothes, each piece felt like a fragment of my life I was reclaiming. A sweater I'd worn on our first trip together, jeans I'd slipped on for casual mornings at home, even the scarf he once said brought out the color in my eyes. They weren't just clothes. They were reminders of who I was before I started bending myself to fit his comfort. My hands shook, but not from fear. It was resolve. His voice from earlier kept replaying in my head, dramatic, overreacting, always picking fights. I whispered into the stillness, almost like I was answering him one last time. If you can't stand up for me, then I'll stand up for myself. My words hung in the air, steadier than I felt, but truer than anything I'd said in years. With every folded shirt, with every item tucked into the bag, I was packing more than belongings. I was packing my dignity, piece by piece. I paused by the dresser, my hand brushing against a framed photo of us. Me with my head tilted toward him, both of us smiling as if nothing could ever break that picture-perfect moment. For a second, my throat tightened, and the tears threatened to fall. But then I remembered the way he'd looked at me outside, more embarrassed by my voice than by her insults. That memory hardened me. I set the frame face down, a quiet goodbye to the version of us that no longer existed. The suitcase grew heavier as I filled it, but with each item, my body felt lighter, as if I was unpacking a weight I'd carried for too long. I moved methodically, almost ritualistically, folding, zipping, organizing. This wasn't an escape done in panic. It was clarity. For once, I wasn't running from chaos. I was walking toward myself. That realization filled me with a strange kind of calm, the kind that comes when you know there's no turning back. I grabbed my purse from the chair, sliding in my keys and wallet, the essentials of a woman finally choosing herself. My reflection caught in the mirror across the room stopped me in my tracks. My eyes were red, my hair a mess, but there was something fierce staring back, someone I almost didn't recognize. And I thought, maybe this was always inside me, waiting for the moment I'd finally let her out. The house felt eerily still as I wheeled the suitcase toward the door, each creak of the floorboards sounding louder than it should. I half expected Daniel to walk in, to block the doorway with pleas or accusations, but there was nothing. Just me and the echo of my own footsteps. My hand lingered on the doorknob, my pulse steady now, no longer racing. For the first time in years, the silence didn't feel suffocating. It felt freeing. I opened the door, the cool night air rushing in, carrying away the remnants of the evening like smoke after a fire. The suitcase rolled across the threshold, and with it, the last thread tying me to a place where I no longer belonged. Each step down the porch felt like shedding another layer of compromise, another apology I'd swallowed for the sake of peace. My chest lifted, lighter with every stride. As I slid into the driver's seat of my car, I glanced back at the house one final time. The windows glowed faintly, but inside, the warmth was gone for me. My grip tightened on the steering wheel, not out of hesitation, but determination. "This isn't the end," I whispered to myself, voice steady in the dark. "This is the beginning." And with that, I turned the key, ready to face a future that was finally mine to shape. Months later, my mornings looked nothing like they used to. I wake up in a small apartment with sunlight spilling through sheer curtains, the scent of fresh coffee drifting from my kitchen. The quiet feels different now. Not heavy, not suffocating, but alive, filled with the hum of possibility. I've carved out a life on my own terms, and each day feels like proof that I didn't just leave a man behind. I found myself again. Work no longer feels like a chore, but a purpose. I'd thrown myself into a new job, and somehow, in the middle of learning and stumbling, I discovered I was capable of more than I ever imagined. My coworkers became friends, friends became a circle of support, and suddenly, I wasn't navigating the dark alone. Laughter over lunches, late-night talks over wine. It was the kind of warmth I had been starving for without even realizing it. One afternoon, sitting across from a friend at a cafe, she leaned in and studied me with a smile. "You seem happier, Victoria. Do you ever think about that night?" Her question landed softly, but it carried all the weight of the past. I wrapped my hands around my mug, letting the warmth seep into my palms, and realized that for the first time, the memory didn't sting. It just reminded me of how far I'd come. I smiled at her, a real smile that reached my eyes this time. "Yes," I said, stirring my coffee slowly. "I think about it, but not with pain anymore." That night was when I realized I deserved more than scraps of respect. It hurt like hell, but it was also the push I needed. Saying it out loud felt like reclaiming the power Melissa tried to strip from me, and the power Daniel refused to give me. I had given it to myself instead. Word had spread, of course. Small towns and circles have a way of carrying stories. I'd heard whispers that Daniel had tried to rekindle things with Melissa, only to be humiliated when she mocked him publicly. Once, that would have cut me open, made me feel like I'd lost some battle I never asked for. But now? It only confirmed what I already knew. Neither of them held any weight in my world anymore. As my friend laughed and shook her head at the gossip, I leaned back in my chair, savoring the sweetness of freedom. There was no bitterness left, only a sense of clarity. They had both tried to define me, box me in, reduce me, but I'd walked away. I was standing taller than I ever had, and nothing about their choices could touch me now. Weeks later, I found myself walking past that same restaurant, the one where it all unraveled. The lights inside glowed warmly, couples laughing over wine, just as Daniel and I once had. For a moment, I paused on the sidewalk, watching the scene through the window like an outsider peeking into a world I no longer belonged to. But instead of sadness, I felt a wave of pride wash over me. I lifted my chin, shoulders squared, and took a deep breath of the cool night air. My heels clicked against the pavement as I kept moving, stronger with every step. I whispered to myself, the words clear and sure. That dinner didn't break me. It freed me. And in that instant, I knew it was true. Not just a mantra, but a fact carved into my very bones. The woman who had walked into that restaurant months ago would have stayed silent, swallowed the insults, pretended everything was fine. But the woman who walked away that night had finally learned her worth. And as I disappeared down the street, the restaurant faded behind me, nothing more than a memory of the night I chose myself.